All right, good Thursday morning to everyone except Dave Roberts and Rob Manfred. Jared Carrabis saying it best here on Twitter. Pulling Clayton Kershaw 6 outs away from a perfect game at 80 pitches should be a crime punishable by up to 90 years in prison. Come on!
I mean, geez. Moves like this is why...
Yes!
Baseball is dead! And
dead.
Speaking of baseball is dead, you don't want to miss the latest episode of Jared's new DraftKings podcast,
Terrible.
which drops...
Not the podcast.
When does it drop?
It drops
this afternoon!
It's going to drop this afternoon.
My God.
And you know he's going to have something meaty to say about this.
There's going to be some hot takes about this.
And speaking of meaty, this show, The Sweat, presented by DraftKings, I'm Emerson Lancia alongside Jesse Bun in the Oven Cofield. I do want to
37 weeks today.
It's true, dude. She's never been more miserable than she is
Never
right
been
now.
more miserable, never been more pregnant.
You can't even like breathe properly
No, I can't
right
breathe
now.
properly. My lungs are like in my brain.
Yep. That's
They're
right.
not
And
where
if you
they're
sneeze,
supposed to
you
be.
pee.
Yeah, when I sneeze, I pee. My lungs are in my brain. It's just not.
That's a lot of information.
There really is, and I'm really glad that you're here, DraftKings contributor, one of our baseball gurus, Steve Mckinnon. Also, Nick Fryer is here.
Many Nick Fryers are present.
Nick, that
Too
is
many.
That is quite
Yeah.
Brandon.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I don't know who this guy is. I mean, he looks pretty good, but that's not me.
And
That's
you're not
somebody
wearing
else.
a flannel today. Wow.
Well, again, this person is a different person. That is not me in my background. I would never do that. I'm not that narcissistic.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Bukes, which side are you on here? Leave Kershaw in or pull him at 80 pitches, just 6 outs away from becoming the 24th perfect game in MLB history, a sport that's been around since the 1500s?
1500s. Yeah, that's correct. That's actually the correct date. Absolutely asinine to pull Clayton Kershaw in that type of scenario. I know it's early April. We got to worry about health. We had we didn't have an extended spring training. These guys have to be careful. It's not like he was 5 innings out. He's 6 outs away from something that, quite frankly, he will probably never have the opportunity to do again. If anybody gets on, fine. Then you pull him after that. Kershaw was a great sport about it. He was like, I was okay with the decision. He didn't throw his manager under the bus. But deep down, you have to think that that's something he wanted to do. Already has a no-hitter under his belt. Would love the opportunity to get a perfect game. He's getting older. This opportunity is not going to come again. That was total crap.
100%. Like, Fryer, what say you here? Because to me, he's going to get, with his injury history, he's going to get injured like either way. It could be the next couple of games, like 5 pitches in. We obviously don't wish that at all, but
Right.
I'm like, it's mind-boggling to me that he wouldn't have this opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know how you move on from this as a pitcher. I mean, you got to go out there and just do your job like any other day. But I mean, I don't know how you don't have a little bit of resentment in some capacity towards not necessarily your manager, but the people who are above him. Because honestly, that's the biggest thing for me with Dave Roberts. It's like when you look back on your career as a manager, how much are you going to really appreciate what you did? How much are you going to feel like, yeah, that was a lot of what I did, a lot of the decisions I made. I knew where to push the buttons. Or you're going to look at it and say, all the people in the front office told me what to do, and I was just basically a puppet. Because that's what this move is right here. There's no way that any real baseball person is going to go and say, oh yeah, you know what? It's early in the season. He's only at 80 pitches. He doesn't have time to recover if he's exhausted after this game, if he goes 120 or whatever. I understand that's unheard of now, but it's a perfect game. Let the guy throw it. He's a legend. He's earned this. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, he's had the no-hitter, but we're talking a perfect game, and Steve, you nailed it too. He's on the back 9 of his career here. This is just a 1-year deal that he's on. If I'm him, I'm like, damn, man, I don't know if I'm going to be back in this position ever again.
He did say after the game, as much as I would have wanted to do it,
yeah,
I've thrown 75 pitches in a sim game. I hadn't gone 6 innings, let alone 7.
He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. He's going to say the right things.
But I was just saying to you before the show, which I think that you guys might agree with this, it's so interesting because if he hadn't gotten pulled, if Roberts hadn't pulled him, and then he had gotten injured, everyone would be on here being like, how do you not take an injury-prone guy this early in the season? How do you not take him out of this game? it's either
People- yeah,
way.
people
It's
wanna be
like,
upset
you
about
know,
I got to say, guys, I would disagree. I think that
Really?
this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for anybody. It's a perfect game. This is no joke. Like, if you got a guy who's got an opportunity for that, look, freak accidents happen, absolutely. But this early in the season, heaven forbid it's like a Tommy John injury or whatever. That's different. But other than that, like, yeah, he's going to have time to recover. So no, I would be totally fine if you left him in and something happened.
Definitely blame the analytics people for this. People who look like Nick Fryer.
okay. Okay.
Wow.
Well, Kershaw's teammate Walker Buehler is going for the Dodgers tonight. His
Oh.
outs recorded prop sits at 16.5 right now. That's 5 1/3 innings. He went 5 innings and only 78 pitches in his first start. So assuming that Roberts stretches him out a little more tonight, is this your favorite pitcher prop that you're looking at this evening, Steve?
No, there's actually one that I like with JT Brubaker going for the Pirates. Hits allowed, you can get over 4.5 at -115. That feels pretty low for against a Nationals team who, quite frankly, they're going to go nowhere this season, but they've been hitting the ball, at least in the early going. And the thing with Brubaker is he struggles against lefties. If you look at the Nationals lineup that they've been running out since the season began, realistically, 5 of the top 6 hitters can or already do hit from the left side. So they could really have an offensive barrage in the early going here against Brubaker. And you look at what Washington's done so far, they're ranked 7th in hits already this season with 51. And then with Brubaker, he's allowed over 4.5 hits in 14 of the 24 starts that he made last season. All of this combined says, this is a pretty good prop. I think I'm going to take it.
All right, Nick, what's your favorite pitcher prop that you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, I think it's a great call by Steve on Brubaker. I think sometimes he's look good, but other than that, like I think he's an easy guy to pick on. Anybody on the Pirates pitching staff kind of is. But for me, my favorite one tonight is Charlie Morton at 5.5 Ks. The over on that going up against the Padres. Through 30.5 innings against starting pitching this season, the Padres have struck out 36 times. 22 of those innings have come against right-handed pitchers, and those pitchers have racked up 26 Ks in that span. I know that Morton only got 5 last time out, but only pitched 5 in the 3rd inning, and he only threw 78 pitches, so we should see a larger workload for him tonight. He's going up against a team that strikes out a lot.
How about a hitter prop tonight, Nick? Another big storyline yesterday, like beefy, bloodied Vladdy Jr. going 4 for 4 against the Yankees. He was 0 for 8 in the series leading up to yesterday's game, and he hits not 1, not 2, but 3 taters. So, and 2 of them off Kermit Cole. So anything you like Vladdy Jr. related in the prop department?
So Vladdy was not the guy who's on my radar, although I will say that first home run he hit off of Cole was absurd, too. That thing was in on his hands. I don't know how he got around on that one. But when you look at Salvador Perez, did it the night before. He had 2 bombs, a guy who a lot of us were on over the course of last season. Over 1.5 total bases for him tonight, going up against Casey Mize, a guy who he's done well against throughout the course of his career, 7 for 15. Got a double home run. Both of those extra base hits came last season. And look, I know Mize is a little bit better against right-handed pitching than he does against left-handed pitching, but this is a guy who has a track record, has familiarity with him. They saw Mize quite a bit last season. If you want a little bit more value too, because that one's at like -105, Mookie Betts over 1.5 total bases at +120. And I also like Connor Joe tonight. It's -115. It's a little bit lower, but he's been great to start the season. Over 1.5 total bases. But if you're just going to go with one, Salvy's the guy tonight.
All right, who's your guy tonight in the hitter prop department, Steve?
Yeah, staying with that Nationals-Pirates game, taking Josh Bell to go over 1.5 bases at +125. He's already collected a double and 2 home runs through the first 7 games of the season, which I think is more than he did through the first half of the entire year last year. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that already exceeded his numbers from last season. You look at what Brubaker has done, like I said, he really struggles against lefties, but last year with men on base, because we're expecting that already in the early going, opposing hitters hit 277 off him last year. So Josh Bell already flashing a little bit of power so far this season, getting him over 1.5 bases at +125. I think that's a really strong number there, especially with the early struggles by the Pirates bullpen as well. So even if he doesn't get it against Brubaker, there should be plenty of opportunities as this game goes on. So like getting the plus money here at +125 for Bell to go over 1.5 bases.
Hey, Steve, would you consider Vladdy Jr. over half a home run here, +320, so basically to go yard?
I mean, obviously you're chasing what happened last night.
Yes.
He's obviously not going to do what he did last night. Obviously home runs, the odds are so long because of how rare that it happened. So if you're throwing something small on that, by all means, but this is not something I'm particularly looking at for tonight.
Okay.
All right, which game total is going over the run total here? Braves Padres only 7.5 here, Steve.
I am going to go to that Blue Jays and Yankees games that over 8.5. I think that's just a little bit too low, just like it was last night. Here's the thing. Overs are not hitting at all so far this season. They've only hit 39.5% of the games so far this season. Now, granted, we're a week as of today of the season starting, but unders have absolutely dominated thus far. That being said, you have to look at this matchup here. We don't really know what we're going to get out of Luis Severino, who didn't pitch all of last year. And then you have Kevin Gausman, who is with the Blue Jays. Obviously, Gausman was phenomenal when he was with the Giants. But now he's coming back here in the AL East with the Blue Jays. His numbers when he was in the AL East before were extremely poor. I think we have this notion that Gausman is this newfound pitcher, but we have to take into consideration where he's been pitching for the past couple of years. Now he's coming back to the AL East against a very powerful lineup, and you can obviously say the same about the Blue Jays as well. When these two teams are going together, if I see a total of 8.5, I have to side with the over in that one.
All right, Nick, which run total is catching your eye?
I hate saying this, but I think Steve put that really well. You're at Yankee Stadium too, which obviously I always talk about how it's a crackerjack box there. Any fly ball can go out, whether it's to right or left. No disrespect to Vladdy because he earned those home runs. But I think when you look at Severino, and the biggest thing though is Gausman too. Yeah, I mean when he was with the Orioles, I remember watching him this guy has some great stuff, but he just cannot put it together. And yes, he put it together when he moved away from the division. His stuff got much tighter, but still, these are guys who have hit him really hard. You look at some of the track records of these guys in the AL East. One of the guys who've done really well against him throughout their career is Aaron Judge. So I just think you got to take the over on this one tonight, again, with Severino being a big question mark, too.
All those dudes hitting the baseball extremely hard is not helping John Sterling on some of his home run calls either. Which team's run line or which team's run line or money line do you like tonight, Nick?
I'm going to go to that Braves-Padres game because, of course, I do feel really good about Charlie Morton tonight on the bump. And, of course, we've seen the Braves offense do quite a bit of damage in the early going so far. And I don't have a ton of faith in Joe Musgrove. I've never been really that high on him. I know he had a quality start against the Diamondbacks last time out, and he struck out 8 guys. But, I mean, again, this is a guy who I question in terms of length every time he goes out there, what he's going to do. And the Padres, from an offensive perspective, yes, they had a 10-run showing fairly recently, and they've had one 5-run showing. But other than that, it's been crickets. And if you look at the matchups, too, and how the Padres have done against Charlie Morton over the course of their careers, there's really only one guy that's seen him a lot and hit him well, and that is Jurickson Profar. Other than that, a lot of unfamiliarity for this lineup against Charlie Morton, which always plays in a pitcher's favor.
All right, Steve, I'm looking at your Mariners minus 110 there on the money line. The White Sox have some injury issues now early on.
Yeah, look, the Mariners are always a play. I don't have to tell you that. So I'm going to, divulge and go into something else. I think the Angels at minus 1.5 going against the Rangers is a play to make tonight, especially with Shohei Ohtani on the mound. Now, if you look at his numbers from last year, it almost seems as if he struggled on the road. A 5.02 ERA. That's not very good. But if you look at his FIP, which really is a measurement of ERA, if you strip away defense, it was down to 3.34. So that really indicates that he was a victim of some shoddy defense behind him with the Angels. But then you look at who the Angels are facing tonight in Dane Dunn. They absolutely destroyed his confidence every time he took the mound against them last year. 13 innings pitched, 12 runs, 16 hits. What's the Angels' problem? This guy has a family. Why do they want to embarrass him like that? I don't care, because tonight I'm betting on the Angels to win. So you embarrass him in front of his family tonight, that's okay with me. But from a normal basis, if I'm not betting it, give the guy some slack. But with those numbers all combined, minus 1.5 for the Angels tonight, I think that's a solid number against the Rangers, who, by the way, have no pitching at all. Absolutely atrocious.
All right, Steven, hit us with your slate-approved pick, your absolute favorite bet on the board tonight.
So you're going to have to take this now because the line is moving quickly. But under 8 runs for the Phillies and Marlins, I believe it's now at minus 120. It was minus 110 about an hour ago. I don't feel great about taking an under when it involves that Phillies offense. But this one is in Miami, and they're facing a Marlins team that has scored a total of 14 runs this entire season. As a club, they're hitting 199 with a 264 on-base percentage and a 313 slugging. They're going up against Kyle Gibson, who looked like Pedro Martinez against the Oakland Athletics in his first start of the season. And then the Marlins are running Sandy Alcantara, who was phenomenal in Miami last year. 2.41 ERA, 38 total runs allowed. through 104 and 2/3 innings. There's not going to be a lot of offense in this one, especially with it being in Miami. So take this now at 8 before it ends up moving to 7.5.
Nick, make your case.
Yeah, I talked about Charlie Morton earlier, and I feel really great about him going in tonight. I think his strikeouts prop is going to be my absolute #1 favorite at plus money too. So make sure you guys move on that because I saw it open at plus 120. I think it's moved down a little bit since then. But looking at what the Padres have done, in the early going, especially in the strikeout department, and now we're going to get a little more length out of Morton. I think that he should easily get to 6 strikeouts tonight.
Steven, Nicholas, phenomenal work. Until next time, we will do that DFS thing around the diamond. That's coming up later in the show, right after we talk some hockey.
Say hello to our NHL panel. We have RotoWire's Paul Bruno and AJ Schulz and NHL.com's Fantasy on Ice host Pete Jensen. The fellas, they're here for NHL opening faceoff, so we're getting your best DFS plays on tonight's slate.
That's right. We're getting closer and closer to the playoffs here, too. So we've got, Colorado, I believe, is the only Western Conference team here, guys, that has clinched a postseason berth. 4 teams have done so in the East, and it looks like the Avalanche could be heading towards their 2nd consecutive President's Trophy right now, man.
Ooh.
It's going to be good. So, yeah, let's look ahead to tonight. There's a lot of games on the slate. It looks like 12 games on the slate.
Ooh, wow.
Favorite center tonight, Paul?
There's a whole bunch of number ones that have really good matchups. I'm fading some of the big boys in favor of these guys that have the lopsided advantages. Look at JT Miller going against Arizona, 11 points and 32 shots on goal his last 10 games played. Stamkos versus Anaheim. Anaheim has packed it in, and Stammer and his team are fighting for playoff positioning, so he'll be ready to pile on them. He's got 13 points in his last 10 games. Sebastian Aho leads the red-hot Carolina club against a very cold Detroit club. He's only coming in at $6,900, maybe the best bet of that bunch. But I think the best bet on the board is Elias Pettersson. The guy is on a roll that's been now 2 months in the making, and nobody's talking about him, despite the fact he continues to do it. 16 points in his last 10 games played, coming in at only $5,800 tonight.
AJ, who you want here at center, man? I mean, Paul nailed it. A lot of ones here. A lot of expensive dudes.
Yeah. For me, I think he's right when he mentioned Sebastian Aho here. Like, obviously, it's hard to make an argument against Matthews or McKinnon, who's coming off that hat trick there. But Aho, 7 goals, 7 assists in his last 12 games. The matchup with the Red Wings is a good opportunity to capitalize on the Canes. And at the end of the day, 6,900 for Aho just gives you so much roster flexibility throughout the rest of your lineup without having to go for the top guys on the board. So for me, I agree with Paul. Aho is the play tonight.
Pete, I know how pricey Austin Matthews is, but he has the most upside of all these players.
It's true. I love what he's doing this season, leading the league in goals. I'm just keeping it simple at center, though. I'm riding the hot hand with Nathan McKinnon. 5-point game, like AJ mentioned. He's doing great playing with Andrei Burakovsky lately. It doesn't matter who's injured, who's not, right? Kadri's injured. Of course, Landeskog's injured. It doesn't matter. This guy is a shots on goal machine. He's got the highest floor, in my opinion, and the highest ceiling as well after a performance like that He's playing the New Jersey Devils, who are very leaky defensively. They have still not solved that goaltending issue. Last time McKinnon played the Devils, he had 3 points. Wouldn't be surprised if he replicated that or built on it here tonight.
All right, AJ, let's look at the wing. Two dudes who are going to cost you over $8,000. Ovechkin and Mitch Marner. Are you going to pay up for either of them or save some cash?
I'm going to save some cash here as well, just because there are so many really good options here. Kirill Kaprizov at 7,300 and Matthew Tkachuk at 6,400. Both guys who should be in play for your lineups tonight. Like, after Matthews, he'll probably do it tonight, but after him, these are the next two guys who could get to 100 points this year. Tkachuk, fresh off a hat trick against Seattle. He does have the more difficult matchup between the two, facing Vegas, but at $900 cheaper, if I'm picking just one of Kaprizov or Tkachuk, I'll look at Tkachuk here, but I think Kaprizov is definitely in play as well.
All right, Pete, who's in play for you on the wing?
I mean, there's some great prices out there on some of these guys. You could ride the hot hand with Matt Boldy, who I know Anna was hyping up previous show. That line was awesome for Minnesota, the second line with Gaudreau and Kevin Fiala. Kevin Fiala, great shot volume as well. So, continue to sprinkle those guys into your lineups. I thought it was interesting. I saw that Elias Pettersson, I guess he practiced at wing yesterday. He's actually wing eligible and sub $6,000. I know Paul mentioned him earlier, very favorable matchup. Vancouver, even though they're kind of falling out of this thing, they're still playing really well. They're still pushing, and they're still mathematically alive. So expect Pettersson to keep his thing going. And then, Mark Stone, I feel like nobody's going to be taking him because Vegas is kind of hot and cold. They're this mysterious team right now. But I love Stone playing with his usual line mates in Pacioretty and Stevenson for only $4,000.
All right, Paul, who do you like on the wing?
This show's less fun when AJ and I agree, but I got to go with him on Tkachuk against Vegas. He's becoming a real emotional leader, and he's focused in a positive direction, so I really like that for him. He comes in at $6,400 after producing 16 points in his last 10 games played, pouring a lot of shots on goal. And I think despite the fact that this game is significant for both clubs, Calgary's just got a little bit too much focus going in their favor, and Tkachuk will lead them. But I look back at a couple of mismatches I highlighted at the center position for two wingers that I'm going to keep an eye on. Of course, Nikita Kucherov, one of the more costly ones at $7,900, but he's been delivering the goods all year long. I think this is another spot where he could pad his stats. But Evgeny Svechnikov is a guy that really catches my eye. 6 points in his last week of play, gets Detroit in what should be a big mismatch in favor of Carolina, and he comes in at $6,500, my best bet at the wing position.
Hey, Pete, let's go back to the blue line here. I know it's a position that a lot of people, AJ, will typically punt on, but, if you're going to spend up, typically want to aim for maybe someone on one of those top power play units who can actually put the biscuit in the basket. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love aiming for the power play angle, and you don't even necessarily need to spend up to do it. I mean, look at what Torrey Krug did for the St. Louis Blues coming back from injury on first power play. He plays with Justin Falk at even strength. That's one of the best pairs in the NHL this season. And Torrey Krug, multi-point game, 5 shots on goal, 24 DraftKings points in that return from injury against his former team. Now he gets Buffalo. Buffalo is a dangerous team, as always, but, I mean, let's be honest, they could pour it on. The St. Louis Blues can. Buffalo's very inconsistent game to game, as we've seen all season. So, yeah, I think that Krug would be worthy of spending up for $5,500 to $6,000 DraftKings dollars, but he's only $4,200, so he's got to be a lineup lock.
Paul, who's your man in the blue man group tonight?
There's three defensemen I'm focusing on. Falk was one of them, and he has the mismatch against Buffalo, who will return to mere mortal status. They're not playing the Leafs tonight, so that makes Falk a lot more attractive at $5,500. Tony DeAngelo for Carolina has been chugging along consistently, a point producer there, and I'm counting on a big mismatch. He'll be a part of that against Detroit for $5,900. And then Chris Letang, I'm sure AJ is going to mention something about him. I like him tonight, $6,300, 9 points in the last 10 games, pouring in a lot of shots on goal and typically leading the Pittsburgh offense. They need to get off the schneid tonight, and I think they will.
Okay, AJ, it's your time to shine, big boy.
Look, I'm not touching the Penguins right now. I'm still fed up with this team, but that's a completely different issue. For me, I think it is a pay-up night, and I look at Cale Makar here, 7,900. It's a hefty price tag. But you look at the month of April, he's got 22 shots. That's second most of anybody, any defenseman. It's tied, in fact, with the aforementioned Chris Letang. But Makar has 6 points this month as well, compared to just 3 for Letang. I think he's really in play. I liked and would have probably taken Justin Falk and stuck with him, but with Torrey Krug back, we saw Falk not get any points in that last game. And so I think it lowers the value for Falk, especially at 5,500. So I love Pete's call at switching over to Torrey Krug between those two, given the price range. So I would go Krug on one side, Cale Makar on the other.
All right, Paul, hit us with your favorite value play on tonight's massive slate.
You know what? I'm going to go to a couple of teams we haven't really mentioned much. Fiala for Minnesota against Dallas, $4,900 for him. He's been leading this team in stretches during the course of the season, and he's going through a nice stretch right now with 9 points in his last 10 games played. So that's a low price for him. Jake DeBrusk really fitting in. He must think he's died and gone to heaven, playing on the number one line in Boston. His offensive totals have taken off in that stretch. 7 goals his last 10 games played. And then if Getty Dadonov playing with Jack Eichel has found the mother lode there too, 6 goals, 13 points in his last 10 starts. On defense, there's a couple of value plays too that I'll mention. Noah Hannafin playing very, very well for Calgary, producing at both ends with block shots, shots on goal, and scoring. So he's averaged 12 DK points per game in his last 10 and costs only $3,900. Finally, Jared Spurgeon, a power play quarterback in many. For $4,500, you get a guy who's got 9 points and 14 blocks for an average of 10.9 DK points in that lineup.
All right, AJ, where are you going for value?
Well, Seth Jarvis for the Hurricanes had a rough February, but since returning from a 3-game absence in mid-March has racked up 13 points in his last 14 contests. He's on that top line with Sebastian Aho, which gives you a nice stack option there. He's super cheap when you consider that, so it allows you to use Aho and Jarvis in tandem together. He's been playing really well, and again, we've talked about the matchup with the Red Wings being a juicy one for Carolina.
All right, Pete, hit us with some value, please.
I really like Tim Stützle. The guy's having a breakout season after being a high pick a couple years ago in 2020. I mean, look at what this guy has done over his past 18 games. 20 points, 11 on the power play. He's playing on that first unit, and he's got 41 shots on goal in the span. So Tim Stützle, regardless of matchup, regardless of lineup placement, is looking like a steal at number 3 for the Senators. And now they have Batherson back. They got their offensive weapons, at least in the forward group. So I think that they're one of the top spoiler teams any given night, you know, fantasy-wise or anything else you're doing out there. I do think that Stützle has hidden value because his price is still really cheap.
Guys, nice job. Appreciate you hanging out with us this morning. So we will talk some NBA coming up next and a dude who threw his mouth guard and hit a young fan in the face.
Ooh, yikes.
All right, NBA Play-In tournament. So last night's results here, teams eliminated. That would include the Spurs And then you've got the Hornets that were absolutely trucked by the Hawks.
Yeah, that
So then,
was
like
not
tomorrow
pretty.
now, yeah, it's going to be the Hawks and the Cavs try to play for that 8 seed. Winner
Yep.
will claim it, and then you got the same out in the West, the Clippers and the Pelicans. Really, the big story yesterday, like just what a train wreck, no pun intended, of a day for the Hornets. It started with like a train that stopped in front of their team bus, and
Yep.
then a lot of them had to like get out and. Poor things, they had to walk to the arena.
Yeah.
And then they just get run over by the
Absolutely.
Hawks. And then you have like Bridges, who got ejected, Miles Bridges.
And he was getting heckled by fans, and he got frustrated.
Yeah.
And he ripped his mouth guard out, and he threw it, and he did not hit the man who was heckling him. He hit an innocent girl.
Yeah, I know, she's like standing there like enjoying her
And
night.
she was like, it's also, I just kept watching the video. It was like slow motion. Like she was like, the mouth guard like hit her in the
hits
face.
off her like shoulder
She
and
was
then
there,
her
like-
face, and it's just a bunch of nasty drool.
Ew. Anyway,
on her face.
he did reach out on Twitter,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
like, can somebody get me in touch with her, because that was like inappropriate. I didn't mean to do that. So obviously, like, not his intention, of
Yes,
course.
it's not. You just gotta stay cool, calm, and collected, just like these guys here. DraftKings contributor Matt Meiselman, RotoWire's Nick Whalen, and Four Seasons podcast host Ryan Mogjosh. Biggest takeaway last night, Mr. Mogjosh, and it was a cold night shooting also for DeJounte Murray. That definitely didn't help the Spurs.
No, that kind of screwed me. I was 100% exposure to DeJounte Murray in all of my lineups, which kind of stunk. But my biggest takeaway was watching the Pelicans, and I couldn't help to think, man, they have debatably a top 15 player not playing in the entire league, Zion. If they get Zion back sometime down the future, not this year, but this team is special. CJ and BI together are great. Joe Val down low is great. Now they have role players like Herb Jones and Devontae Graham who are doing some things, but adding Zion to this team makes them very, very special. And they looked good last night. New Orleans looked like it was rocking. They could be on the up and up.
Yeah, Maddie, I saw like you and Ehrenberg tweeting back and forth a little bit. Like, is CJ McCollum the best player in the NBA who hasn't made an All-Star game?
I'm only partially kidding about Jose Alvarado. I think
Okay.
that guy's awesome. He's like maybe my favorite player in the league. But yeah, McCollum's really good too. I do think when the Pelicans get Zion back, that's a good call. Like they could be a very interesting team next year. But I was more interested in the Eastern Conference side, where I actually do think the Atlanta Hawks can give the Miami Heat a series. Obviously, they still have to beat the Cavs, but they're actually favored against the Cavs for the upcoming play-in game, despite the fact that the game's in Cleveland. Like the Hawks have been the team that I've found to be undervalued the whole year. They just don't get that much respect. Maybe it was their record early on when they had a bunch of guys out for COVID. They had a slow start. I know they still don't have John Collins, but this is still a team with a lot of good players even after Trae Young. I think this is a pretty deep roster, and I don't think the Heat are that great. So it's a big if that the Hawks still get by the Cavs. They still have to play another game, but to me, that's going to actually be a pretty entertaining series. I don't see that in the West. I think the Pelicans are solid, but the Suns are just too good. So I think the season probably ends for them, even if they get by the Clippers. The Hawks, though, I think have a lot to play for still.
Okay, I like that, Matt. Nick, so out of the potential teams here that could be the 8 seed in either the East or the West, which one do you think could give the top seed in their respective conference the biggest headache?
You know, I think we have to eliminate both of the West teams. You know, all due respect to the Clippers and the Pelicans. It's just that the Suns are that strong, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to imagine, you know, teams like the Pelicans and the Clips that have kind of been hanging around. It doesn't sound like Kawhi Leonard's going to be back. You know, it's hard to imagine those teams pushing Phoenix. And you could kind of say the same thing about Miami in the East. You know, I don't think Miami's quite at Phoenix's level, but, you know, you have a Hawks team that was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Maybe they were right all along that they weren't taking the regular season seriously, and they feel like they can just flip this imaginary switch and turn it on when they need to. We'll see if they can actually do that, you know, against the Cavs, a team that's not the Charlotte Hornets, which has now lost back-to-back play-in games by a combined 56 points when you factor in last year's loss. But to me, you know, it's the Hawks or the Cavaliers, and particularly Cleveland. If they can win this game, if they can get Jared Allen back for that first-round series, you know, which would be against Miami. It's a big if. You know, I don't think Cleveland would win the series, but you could see Cleveland stealing a game, maybe 2 games from Miami if a couple things break their way.
All right, Nick, over in the East, which series prop are you looking at? Like, no value with Milwaukee at minus 1,000 over the Bulls. So for the other 2 series that are set, which bet do you like best here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of value when you start to look at that Celtics series, especially if you are on the Nets, you can get them at plus value. But to me, it's that Philadelphia Toronto series. Toronto is plus 150 right now to win the series straight up, basically a series money line. And I'm telling you, things are going to get very interesting if the Raptors take one of those first two games in Philly. And I know Matisse Thybulle, it's not like they're playing without Embiid or James Harden, but it's an unnecessary sideshow. It's the type of player defensively that you absolutely want to have, specifically against a team like Toronto that has guys like Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. Like, those guys are the reason that you have someone like Matisse Thybulle, who's long, who can defend them out on the perimeter, who's going to pressure them as soon as they get over half court. Not having that guy in road games, it's a big deal for Philly. And the drop off from Matisse Thybulle down to someone like Danny Green, who is either the best or the worst player in the NBA in any given playoff game, it's a pretty big drop off. So I think, especially if Toronto can steal game one or game two, that series is going to get really interesting.
All right, what do you think, Ryan? Where are you looking over in the East?
I'm kind of with Nick. I am terrified of James Harden playing meaningful games and being effective. I also kind of like Nets plus 110 to win the whole series. And I'm a firm believer of the team with the best player in the series has an advantage, no matter what, because the playoffs is different basketball than the regular season. You get down to under 4 minutes in the fourth quarter, okay, here's chess. We give the ball to Kevin Durant, get out of the way, let him do his thing. The double's going to come. Oh, they have Kyrie Irving too. I think, this might be a hot take, that they have the two best players in the entire series. And if you just, I know the Celtics are known for their defense and how they've turned it around since the All-Star break, but if you give me two of the best players in the entire series, I don't know how down the stretch they can double both guys. So I kind of like the Nets plus 110.
All right, Maddie, where are you going?
All right, 1 second. I have to get something here.
I knew it.
Okay.
I knew it was coming. I knew it. Go ahead.
This has been my team the entire season. I can't give up on them now. And yeah, I'm not nearly as excited at minus 130. Like, I get why the Nets at plus money would be appealing. The Celtics opened as underdogs for this series, actually. But to me, it's like, yeah, Durant and Kyrie are the two best scorers in the series. I'm not sure that both of them are better than Jason Tatum. Part of it's defense. I think Tatum's defense has really, really improved. But then I think, like, there's a phenomenon where Kyrie and Durant both look better than they are. Like, the efficiency from those guys is not at the level of Giannis and Jokic and Embiid and Steph Curry and even Trae Young, just offense for Trae Young. No, we're not going to include defense for him. But I think that they pass the eye test to a larger degree than their actual ability as scorers. But ultimately, it's just the depth of the teams. Like, yes, I understand in the playoffs, one-on-one and isolation basketball matters more than it does in the regular season. But the Nets still have to have three other guys on the court, and Seth Curry is playing injured. Bruce Brown has played way over his head offensively. I don't think he can continue being a lights-out three-point shooter. He has no track record of that. And Andre Drummond is not the guy to capitalize on the loss of Robert Williams. I think this matchup is less problematic for the Celtics than, let's say, the Bucks series, where not having that interior defense with Robert Williams is going to be a problem. The Nets are much more of a perimeter team. I don't think that the Williams loss is that much of an issue for this first round. So, yes, we need Time Lord back if we're going to make a run to the finals. But for the first round, I think the Celtics are well positioned, even at minus 130, to have a decent edge for this series. And I'm gonna remove this now.
Yeah.
This is just for one answer.
Thank you very
Wow,
much.
that was beautiful.
Jeff Pratt 2.0. How about your favorite series prop for the West right now, Ryan? I'm looking at, what do we have here? Oh, the Nuggets plus 210 against the Warriors? I don't know. What's the latest with, like, Steph Curry and then Jokic stays on the floor for every single second of the game? That'd be tough to knock him off.
Yeah, I'm kind of clueless on that series over there. I don't know how healthy Steph is, and I don't know how they're going to guard Jokic, who, their weakness is defense against bigs. So I'm staying away from that, but I sneaky like this Mavs plus 230. I know Luka has a kind of an injured calf right now. I haven't heard how serious it is. What if he comes out and he's not fazed by it? You're going to get Mavs 230 as the 4 seed over a Jazz team who they're so hot and cold, and they're a great regular season team usually, and they were the 5 seed this year. I don't know if they can just turn it on and be something special beyond what they were in the regular season. So even with a 60, 70% Luka, I kind of like Mavs plus 230. And as the series goes on, hopefully he gets healthier and healthier. I like that. I think it's a steal.
All right. Do you consider any of these odds in the West a steal, Matt?
I have a little bit of a different outlook on this Jazz Mavericks series, although like I agree with what Ryan's saying there. If Luka does play and he's anything like the normal Luka, plus 230 is a really enticing line for the Mavericks. But I think despite the fact that the Mavericks have not said anything definitive about Luka Doncic, we can kind of read into it and just say he's not playing game one. I mean, Utah was an underdog when that line opened. They're minus 4.5 for the first game in Dallas. The odds makers are not expecting Luka to be out there. I think he probably misses game two. So I'm not really ready to bet the Mavericks yet. I think the Jazz are a better team than people give them credit for. The collapses, I think, are causing a little bit of a bias, like these second half leads that they've blown late in the season. So maybe it's a wait and see, but if we get Luka back for, let's say, game two, game three, game four, and Dallas is down in the series, I think I'm much more interested to live bet them to win the series later on once they get him in the lineup, because I do think he ultimately gets ruled out for game one. Game one is less than 48 hours from now. They still have said nothing, and I just don't think it's very likely he's on the court. So once he's back out there, I do think Dallas is right up there with Utah, and they could be pretty big underdogs at that point. So it could be a pretty good value to get them later on in the series.
All right, Waylon, we're looking for your favorite series prop in the West.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about Dallas. It's a wait and see situation. I mean, there's an argument to be made that if we get news within the next couple of days that Luka is back at practice, his calf is feeling better, I think that number is going to drop dramatically. So you might lose value in that sense. But I think Matt is on the right track. You don't want to go all in when we don't know what's going on with Luka. And that situation seems to be a lot more iffy or a lot more severe than what we're seeing with Steph Curry, who was back at practice on Wednesday. Seems like he's on track at least to play in game one of that series. And you can make the same argument that Matt just made when you kind of read between the lines on these odds. I don't think the Warriors are minus 250 to win this series if we're wondering if Steph Curry is going to be healthy in the series. I think the Mavs being plus 230 tells you everything you need to know right now about how Luka Doncic's calf is shaping up, and the Warriors minus 250 tells you everything about how Curry's foot is shaping up. So if Steph was going into that series a little hobbled, keep in mind, Steph, Curry, Draymond, or Steph, Clay, and Draymond have only played like 1.2 games together this season. Like, that's a pretty big if. If Steph was still hobbled, I would kind of like Denver to maybe sneak in and steal that series. But if Steph is going to be playing, and even if he's at 85, 90%, I think that's enough for me to stay away from that Denver line.
All right, which series spread are you most confident about right now, Matt? Memphis only minus 135 to beat the Wolves in 4, 5, or 6 games.
Yeah, it kind of feels like everyone here and then elsewhere is a little too high on the Nuggets relative to like what the Warriors have been. And it's weird for me to say because I've been fading Golden State the whole year. But the reason I've been anti-Warriors is mostly due to the fact that they're giving minutes to guys like Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, who I do think have bright futures ahead of them, but are just not very effective players yet. Like, they're rookies, they make a lot of mistakes. I think the team is a lot worse when those guys are playing big minutes. But for the playoffs, I mean, for one, I'm assuming Steph Curry at least is on the court for game one. And then by game 2, 3, 4, he's close to full strength. But I think guys like Otto Porter Jr. and Andre Iguodala will play much bigger minutes in the playoffs with their veteran experience, and then also just being better players who I think the team was worried about keeping healthy throughout the year. In the playoffs, I think we see more of those guys, and it's a much more efficient Warriors team. So the bet I like is probably to lay the 1.5 games on the series spread, plus 100 for minus 1.5 games. Taking minus 150 to win the series, I think, is okay too. It's a little less appealing just in terms of the odds, but I am actually pretty optimistic about the Warriors' chances. I worry about Jokic, but like the Nuggets don't have much else. Jamal Murray's doubtful for the series. Michael Porter Jr. almost certainly will not be back. So I think the Warriors are the much better team, especially when they get this playoff-style rotation with Iggy, with Otto Porter, more Clay minutes, more Draymond minutes. I think there's a lot of really good players who are going to play more in the playoffs for them.
All right, Nick, what do you think? Which series spread are you most confident about right now?
That's the one that jumps out to me too, and it kind of runs contrary to what we just talked about, where the Warriors are pretty heavy favorites. What was it, minus 250 to win that series? And if we think Curry's going to be healthy, and the Nuggets are not going to have Michael Porter, they're not going to have Jamal Murray. We saw this team get absolutely pummeled by Phoenix in round 2 last year when it was kind of just Jokic and MPJ. I think the Warriors, if they're at full strength, yeah, they probably win this series by more than 1.5 games. That gives you Warriors in 6. It obviously gives you Warriors in 4 or Warriors in 5. So I like that call by Matt. And then you're not getting a ton of value. It's minus 170, but Milwaukee minus 2.5. It's certainly better than betting them at minus 1,000 to win the series. That gives you Bucks in 4 or Bucks in 5. I think Bucks in 5 probably the most likely outcome, but pretty hard the way that Chicago has played this season to imagine that series going more than 5 games.
All right, Ryan, what do you think?
I agree. The most confident in is Bucks by a mile, but you have to bet $1 million to win a ham sandwich. So I'm not really interested in those odds. The Memphis, it's now minus 330. And I don't know why the line started so low, but if you guys were watching Kenny and Chuck and Shaq talk about how the Wolves actually have a fighting chance, I don't see it at all. And maybe all that hype on national television got this line to where it was. But they just won their Super Bowl. They celebrated like it was a championship. And I think Memphis is just laughing, and they're going to come to Memphis and just get blown out. So it was a good consolation prize for the Wolves, but I don't think they have a chance against this Memphis team.
All I know is I was extremely distracted when you mentioned ham sandwich. Because
Yeah, we're both really hungry.
We're both extremely hungry right now. But if you're hungry for some baseball, some DFS advice, we're going to do that on the other side of this break, our last break of the show. Thank you very much, basketball guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Vladdy, big night last night versus the Yankees.
Oh, man.
4 hits, 3 home runs, 4 RBI. What a guy. 49 fantasy points, and he cost you just $6,000.
Yeah. But Howie, look at Clayton Kershaw there, bottom of the screen. Let's zoom in on that.
I know.
So, 6 outs away from a perfect game. Second highest fantasy score last night on the slate. Nearly 46 DraftKings fantasy points. Who knows what that number would have been had Dave Roberts done the right thing and kept him in.
We'll never know. We'll
No,
never know.
We're going to do the right thing right now and bring in DraftKings contributor Gary and Thorne and RotoWire's Eric Halterman.
Fellas, what'd you think about that last night? Kershaw getting pulled.
I mean, Kershaw was fine with it. So
No, God.
It's kind of just how it goes. Look.
Yeah, it's no fun as a fan, but every year fans seem to rediscover that pitchers are on pitch counts for their first start of the season. It was always going to happen.
No.
The sad thing is that it happens in April, not in June, when he probably would have gotten the chance to go deeper.
No, you're both wrong. It's actually sad that you're both wrong. But congratulations, Gary, on Vladdy doing some damage to the Yankees last night.
Yeah, I stepped on my hand before this segment started, so I'm going to be really good.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, that's right. Because the injury that we talked about earlier, how he was bloodied, in case you missed it, it was a runner, right? Or was it the first baseman? Someone cleated his finger
on
accident?
He was trying to field an errant throw at first. He put his hand down, and Aaron Hicks stepped on it. Not Aaron Hicks' fault or anything, but yeah, it was real bloody.
Yeah, it certainly was. And that's when he hit all the home runs. It didn't even stop him at all. He is the highest priced hitter tonight. But let's start with favorite pitcher. Let's start with favorite pitcher, Garion, over $8,000.
It's the chalk answer, but I think you just have to roll with Walker Buehler tonight. He threw 78 pitches in his first start, so I'm sure his he can at least get to 90. This is his second start, unlike Kershaw, so no worries about that. This is just a fantastic matchup against the Reds, who really, after opening day, sort of that mini explosion they had against Max Fried, they have just not been able to hit. And specifically, they have not been able to hit right-handed pitching. They have a 57 WRC plus, small sample, yada, yada, yada. We're 1 week into the season. They have not hit right-handed pitching, and they have struck out more than any other team in baseball against right-handed pitching. 31.1% strikeout rate as a team within the split. I think if you've got Buehler around 90, 95, 100 pitches, which I think is justifiable given this is, again, his second start of the season, I think we're looking at 7, 8, 9 strikeouts from Buehler and probably 6, 7 innings of really quality baseball.
Yeah, and you just so happened to write up Mr. Buehler in your article on DK Nation. Baseball picks, predictions to consider on DraftKings Sportsbook for April 14th. Okay, Eric, let's talk some DFS, though. Favorite pitcher north of 8K?
Yeah, I don't know if you have to go in this range today because there are a couple guys just south of 8K that I do like, guys like Shohei Ohtani and Joe Musgrove. If you are paying up, I think I am with Gary, and that I'd go all the way up for Buehler. The matchup's just too good given what's left with the Reds. They just have not been hitting, as Gary had mentioned. Although if you want to stay off of Buehler because you're a little bit worried that his velocity was down about 1.4 miles per hour in his opening start, probably just a first start of the year coming off a short spring thing. But if you're worried about that, I think Charlie Morton is a defensible pick at 9,300 against the Padres. It is a much tougher matchup, but the park's still pretty good. And Charlie Morton, he's still got it. He was still good in every way you wanted to see from him last year. Had a fine opening start as well. So I think Buehler's probably a bit better, but if you want to avoid those crowds, I don't think you're going very wrong by pivoting to Morton.
All right, let's move to your favorite pitcher who's under 8K, Eric.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot more options here.
Yeah, I did mention a couple just south of 8K, but I'm actually going to go all the way down to Dane Dunning at 6,400 versus the Angels. I think he's the cheapest viable option. There's 3 pitchers cheaper than him. 2 are pitching at Coors Field, and the other is just an opener. So if you want to really save cash, I think Dunning is actually completely fine. He's not exciting. Had 3 earned runs in 5 innings against the Jays in his season debut. 4.51 ERA last year, but the ERA estimators, some of them like FIP and XFIP, said he deserves something in the high 3s. His skill set is actually somewhat rare, despite being somewhat bland. 22.3% strikeout rate last year was almost league average, and he combined that with a 53.9% ground ball rate, which is quite strong. Only 3 pitchers made at least 20 starts last year and beat both of those marks. That'd be Logan Webb, Luis Castillo, and Lance McCullers, so quite good company there. If you're even, an average-ish strikeout guy and you keep the ball on the ground as well as he does, that does make you a pretty good pitcher, even though you'd love to see a little bit more whiffs to really up his fantasy value.
All right, Gary, and favorite pitcher under 8K?
Yeah, I think Dunning's a really solid play. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards Shohei Ohtani, justifiably so. This is someone who has a negative FIP right now. That's how good he was in his first start. Had a 39% called strike rate plus swinging strike rate in that outing against Houston as well. Like, he just deserves to be priced higher on this slate. It's almost a little disrespectful that he's not. I will say that if you want to pivot off of Ohtani, Luis Severino is kind of interesting tonight. I think that a lot of people are going to avoid him just because Ohtani is in that range, because Severino is going up against the Blue Jays, and he only pitched 3 innings in his first start, but showcased some big-time strikeout potential in that game, was throwing 98 miles per hour as a starter, which is really impressive. It's more than Severino, or we've seen from Severino at least, aside from his bullpen stints the last couple of seasons. And there's a pretty realistic chance that Teoscar Hernandez is not going to be in the lineup for the Jays today. He probably strained his oblique last night. So this is not a full-strength Blue Jays lineup. So I think as a pivot, Severino's a nice place to go.
Guys, we got like a minute and a half to go in this show. We're going to make it really quick. Gary, and favorite hitter over $4,500?
I'm going to go with Frank Schwindel. It's a lot about Coors Field. Granted, he's $5,100, but this is someone who crushed left-handed pitching last season to the tune of a 177 WRC+. I think Schwindel breaks out tonight against Kyle Freeland.
Eric, favorite hitter over 45?
Yeah, I'll stick in that same lineup and go with Seiya Suzuki at 4,800. I think he's for real. He showed power, contact, and plate discipline in Japan. He's showing it all here, too. As many walks as strikeouts so far this season. 3 homers. He's 3rd in the league in barrel rate, so he's hitting the ball hard, hitting it often, and has a good idea of the strike zone. I'm excited to see what he does in his first game in Coors Field.
All right, so fast, under a minute. Favorite hitter under 3,500, Eric?
let's just, again, keep hammering this Coors Fields game. Clint Frazier, 2,600. He is much more exciting in daily than season-long fantasy because his issue is durability, and all we need is him to be durable for one night. Hasn't done a ton this season because he hasn't started all that often. He seems like he's in a platoon role, but he did lead off in the only game the Cubs faced a lefty. So if he's there again at 2,600, I'd love a piece of him against Kyle Freeland and the Rockies.
All right, real quick, Arian.
Connor Joe, probably going to hit leadoff for the Rockies. Has done it all 3 times they faced a lefty this season. Great numbers against lefties last season. I just think he's way underpriced at 3,400.
All right, guys. That was really well done.
It's a show.
Way to follow the rules.
All right, Madden starts at noon. We got Bengals at the Bears, 5 p.m. slate with Kaufman, Reed, and Bukes. Tune in for that, and we'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.